Keanu Reeves walked into the diner just before closing time. Tired, quiet, dressed like any man off the street. The waitress rolled her eyes. She was wiping down the counter, ready to go home. The last thing she wanted was another late-night customer ordering cheap coffee and leaving spare change as a tip. And this guy, with that wrinkled flannel shirt and old boots, he didn't look like he had more than $5 to his name. What happened next would leave her stunned and completely ashamed. But before we continue, tell us, where are you watching from? If these kinds of stories move you, if you believe kindness still matters in this world, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another story that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Downtown Los Angeles, midnight. The streets were quiet, but the neon signs buzzed above a nearly empty 24-hour diner, a relic from another time. Chrome stools lined the counter. The jukebox in the corner flickered but didn't play. Inside, Rachel, a 29-year-old waitress with tired eyes and a quick temper, was locking the register, hoping to get out early. It had been a long shift. Demanding customers, spilled drinks, and tips that didn't add up to minimum wage. She'd taken this job 5 years ago to help her mom with rent. 5 years later, she was still here, still taking orders, still wiping counters, still swallowing her pride with every "Ma'am, this is cold," or "I said no onions." So when the bell over the door jingled at 11:58 p.m., Rachel sighed loudly before even looking up. "We're closing in 2 minutes," she said flatly. "That's okay," came a soft voice. "I'll be quick." She looked up. A man stepped inside. Tall, calm, wearing a faded flannel shirt and jeans with one knee patch stitched. His boots were scuffed, his hair messy. He looked ordinary, maybe even homeless. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Counter's all that's open," she muttered, gesturing to a stool near the far end. The man nodded and sat quietly. He placed a small, folded wallet on the counter and looked up at her with a gentle expression. "Could I get just a cup of coffee?" She grabbed a mug and poured it, not bothering to ask how he took it. "That'll be $2.15, she said, already annoyed. He pulled a few bills from the wallet. They were crisp, surprisingly crisp, and handed over a 10. Rachel blinked. She didn't expect a tip, but she also didn't expect the quiet way he handed her the change. With both hands, like it meant something. "Keep the rest," he said softly. She stared at the $7 tip in confusion. Most late-night customers left quarters, if anything. Something felt off. "You passing through?" she asked, mostly out of obligation. "Just needed somewhere quiet to think," the man said. He sipped his coffee slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. Rachel watched him for a moment longer. There was something strange about his presence. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't fidgeting. He just sat there, still, like he wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else, like he had nowhere more important to be. "You know," she blurted out suddenly, "most people don't come in here unless they are drunk, broke, or sad." He looked up and smiled gently. "I guess I am none and all of those things." That irritated her more than it should have. Maybe it was the way he talked, or the fact that he was so calm while she was anything but. Or maybe it was how he made her feel like she was the one being watched, the one being understood, when it was supposed to be the other way around. "You don't look like you belong here," she said sharply. "Not in a place like this." He smiled again. "Neither do you." That stung. She turned away quickly, pretending to clean. "People like you," she muttered under her breath, "act humble because you don't have a choice." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached for his wallet again and pulled out a small photograph. A worn Polaroid of a little girl in pigtails holding a stuffed bear. Rachel caught a glimpse. "She yours?" she asked, despite herself. "She was," he said softly. Silence fell between them, the kind that says everything words never could. Rachel didn't know what to say after that. There was a sudden weight in the air, the kind that settles deep in your chest when you realize you've said too much and the other person didn't deserve it. She glanced at the photograph, still resting on the counter. The little girl's eyes were wide and joyful. A missing front tooth, a crayon in one hand. It was old, maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. "I'm sorry," Rachel said, softer now. "I didn't mean to." Keanu gently slid the photo back into his wallet. "It's all right," he said. "You don't know me." She stood silently, unsure of what to do with the knot now forming in her stomach. Something about his voice, so calm, so accepting, made her feel small. And not because he tried to make her feel that way, but because she suddenly saw how little grace she'd shown. "Was she your daughter?" she asked. He nodded once. "She passed away a long time ago. Car accident. Her mother too." Rachel blinked. The man hadn't changed tone. No tears, no drama. But the pain in his voice, the stillness in how he said it, made her throat tighten. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. Keanu offered a quiet smile, as if he were the one comforting her. Grief doesn't go away. It just becomes part of you, like a scar. The diner buzzed faintly from the neon signs outside. Somewhere in the corner, a refrigerator hummed. But inside Rachel's mind, it was quiet. She didn't know who this man was, but suddenly she wanted to. Something about the way he carried his sorrow, not as a weapon, but like a folded note he kept in his pocket. It made her feel like she'd never met anyone real until now. She cleared her throat, trying to shift the mood. "So, coffee and deep life lessons. You're full of surprises." He chuckled. "Sorry, that's all I've got to offer tonight." Rachel folded her arms, studying him. "You're not from here, are you?" "I live nearby," he said, "but I travel a lot. Sometimes too much. For work, for peace," he said. And then after a beat, "and sometimes for people." That answer stuck in her head. Before she could ask more, the bell above the door jingled again. A group of 3 young men came in, laughing loudly, the kind of noise that didn't belong in a quiet, midnight diner. One wore a varsity jacket, one had AirPods in, and the third was already snapping photos of the empty booths. Rachel sighed. Her quiet moment, it seemed, was over. "We're closing soon, fellas," she called out. "Then you better be fast with the coffee," one replied with a smirk. They slid into a booth, feet up on the seat cushions. Talking loudly, Rachel turned to grab a fresh pot of coffee when she heard one of them say, "Hey, check out Flannel Guy at the counter. My man looks like he walked out of a time machine from 1998. The others laughed. Rachel's heart dropped. Keanu didn't react. He didn't even turn his head. He just took another sip of coffee. "You all right?" Rachel asked softly. "Yeah," he said, smiling gently. "People see what they want to see. They don't know who you are," she said. "Doesn't matter," he replied. The laughter behind them grew louder. "Hey, old man," one of the guys called out. "You want to borrow a phone so you can text your horse and buggy?" Keanu turned slightly, not out of anger, just to look at them properly. Calm, measured. "No thanks," he said. Rachel had had enough. She walked over to their table, fire in her eyes. "All right, you need to leave," she said firmly. "Now." The guy in the varsity jacket scoffed. "Why? We haven't even ordered yet. You've been here for 2 minutes and already insulted the only decent human in this place. Get out." They laughed again, but something in her tone told them she wasn't playing. "Whatever," one of them muttered as they stood and made their way out. "Enjoy coffee with your grandpa, lady." As the door slammed behind them, Rachel returned to the counter. Cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry about them," she said. "People suck." Keanu looked up at her with the gentlest expression yet. "Not all people," he said. "You didn't let them sit down." That simple sentence made her chest ache. Then he reached for his wallet again. Rachel noticed this time. It wasn't a modern slim wallet. It was old, leather faded at the edges, stuffed full. He opened it with care, pulling out a folded bill, and left it on the counter beneath the coffee cup. "You really don't have to tip more," she began to say, but he held up a hand. "Not for the coffee," he said, "for how you stood up." She picked up the bill slowly, expecting a 5, maybe a 10. It was 100. Her hands trembled. "Sir, I can't accept this." But Keanu was already standing, sliding his backpack over his shoulder. "You can. You already did." Rachel stood behind the counter, staring at the $100 bill, still warm from Keanu's hand. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried a message rather than just value. A message she wasn't sure she deserved. She watched the door slowly swing shut behind him, the cold air following like a quiet goodbye. He didn't ask for anything, didn't correct her, didn't react to the insults. He simply showed up, gave kindness, and disappeared like some kind of ghost. She picked up his coffee cup, half empty, and turned it slowly in her hand. Lip stain? No. Smudge? Nothing. But inside she saw a folded receipt, tucked under the saucer. Not from the diner, but from a bookstore. She opened it. A signed copy of The Alchemist, and scribbled in neat handwriting at the top of the receipt, "Thank you for keeping the light on. K." Her breath caught. K? Was that meant for her? Or did he leave it behind by mistake? She looked down at the bill again. It wasn't a regular $100. In the bottom corner, in tiny black ink, it had been signed. Her hands trembled. Keanu Reeves. No, that couldn't be, could it? Rachel rushed around the counter and out the door into the night, the cold hitting her like a wall. "Sir?" she called out. "Wait," but the street was nearly empty. Just the fading taillights, of a black motorcycle turning the corner. She ran a few steps forward, but it was gone. All that was left was silence and her thoughts. She walked slowly back inside, heart pounding. It was past midnight now. Rachel locked the front door and turned the open sign around with shaking fingers. The diner was empty again, except for the echo of what had just happened. She sat down on the stool where he'd been. His presence still lingered. Opening her phone, she hesitated before typing. Keanu Reeves, Diner Clothes, 2023. The search results hit her like a punch to the gut. Image after image of him. Flannel shirt, faded jeans, scuffed boots, and always that same soft look in his eyes. In most of the photos, he was helping someone, standing with fans, smiling awkwardly with a homeless man, or reading a book in a subway station. The same book still on her counter. Oh my God, she whispered. It had been him. All this time. The man she snapped at. Dismissed. Judged. The man who left $100 tip. Thanked her for standing up. And never once said who he was. Her throat tightened. She didn't know whether to cry or just sit there in stunned silence. The bell at the back of the diner jingled. Rachel looked up. It was Marcus, the overnight janitor. "You all right?" he asked. Seeing her pale face, she nodded slowly. "I think I just served coffee to someone who's not like the rest of us." Marcus chuckled. "You finally get one of those traveling prophets in here." Rachel looked down at the book still on the counter and smiled through the lump in her throat. Something like that. She stood, walked to the register, and opened the tip jar. Carefully, reverently, she placed the $100 bill inside and folded the lid shut. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to do that?" She nodded. "I didn't earn that for me. I think it's supposed to remind me of something bigger." That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She sat on her couch with the book Keanu had left behind, reading under the dim kitchen light. She got to this line: "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." She closed the book gently and looked out her window at the city lights. Maybe the universe had sent someone tonight, not to fix her life, but to show her she hadn't been looking at it the right way. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the diner early. Too early. The chairs were still upside down on the tables. The smell of cleaning fluid hung in the air, and the sun hadn't yet climbed over the rooftops of downtown LA. But she couldn't sit still at home, not after the night before. Everything felt different. She looked around the small, run-down diner that had felt like a cage for years. The same grease stains on the floor, the same flickering neon, open 24-hour sign in the window. But now, it all felt like a stage where something important had happened. Something sacred. She walked to the counter, pulled out the folded bookstore receipt from under the coffee saucer, and placed it gently next to the old paperback of The Alchemist. Then she opened her notebook, one she rarely used except for bills and inventory, and began to write. Last night a man came in just before closing. He didn't talk much, didn't ask for anything fancy. He wore old boots, an old shirt, and carried a worn backpack. I thought he was poor. I thought he was nobody. But he taught me something rich people rarely do. He reminded me that greatness doesn't arrive in limousines. Sometimes It walks in on tired feet, asks for a coffee, and leaves behind $100 bill and a book that changes how you see yourself. She closed the notebook and exhaled. Around noon, the lunch rush began. Same regulars, same rushed orders, same cranky old man who always complained about the soup being too salty. But this time, Rachel smiled through it. Not fake, not forced, genuine. She checked on customers before they called her, refilled water glasses without waiting to be asked. She even gave the cranky soup guy a slice of pie on the house. "You trying to get rid of me early today?" he asked with a crooked grin. Rachel laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just choosing to be kind." He stared at her for a beat, then nodded. "Well, keep it up, Missy. The world needs more of it." She smiled. Inside, a tiny fire had started to grow. The kind that doesn't burn to destroy, but to warm things back to life. That night after closing, she sat at the counter again. This time, she wasn't cleaning. She wasn't rushing. She just sat. She pulled the $100 bill back out of the tip jar, turned it over, stared at the small, neat signature in the corner. Keanu Reeves. "I never got to say thank you," she whispered aloud. Then, almost on instinct, she pulled out her phone, opened Instagram, and clicked New Post. She took a photo of the book, the receipt, and the $100 bill folded neatly beside a cup of fresh black coffee. Caption: "Last night, I served coffee to someone who changed the way I see the world. He didn't need to say who he was. His kindness said enough." Kindness matters. Waitress Keanu Reeves. Waitress lesson and gratitude, coffee, and miracles. She didn't expect much, but within hours, it exploded. By the next morning, Rachel's phone was vibrating non-stop. Notifications, messages, tags, articles, Waitress shares, touching encounter with Keanu Reeves. Hollywood star leaves. Quiet, $100 tip and disappears. Diner staffer shares the moment she realized she judged a legend too soon. Her Instagram post had gone viral. Thousands of people commented. The story made me cry. I met Keanu once. He's exactly like this. Thanks for sharing. We need stories like this right now. One comment read simply, "Sometimes the world sends us angels, dressed like ordinary people." Rachel sat on her couch, phone still in hand, overwhelmed. It wasn't the attention that mattered. It was the fact that his kindness didn't just touch her. It rippled outward, through the internet, through strangers, through the hearts of people who'd never even set foot in her diner, all because one man sat down quietly and showed her who he really was, not with words, but with actions. Later that evening, as the diner slowed down and the neon lights outside buzzed softly, a man stepped in and sat at the counter. He looked at Rachel and said, "I saw your post. I don't suppose he's been back, has he?" She shook her head. "Not yet." He smiled. "Well, if he ever does, tell him he changed a lot more than just your life." Rachel looked around the diner and nodded. "Yeah," she whispered. "He really did." A week had passed. The Instagram post had calmed down. The media coverage faded. But the feeling inside Rachel hadn't. Something in her had shifted. Not because of fame, not because of followers, but because of a quiet man who taught her a truth she'd been blind to for years. People are more than what they wear. And kindness, real kindness, doesn't need to introduce itself. Rachel now started every shift with a small ritual. She'd place The Alchemist and the signed bookstore receipt next to the register. A reminder, not to customers, but to herself. She smiled more, not for tips. She listened better, not out of politeness. And for the first time in years, she stopped dreaming of escape and started being present. But still, something felt unfinished. One quiet morning, before the lunch rush began, Rachel sat at the counter with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. She stared at it for a long time before finally writing, "Dear Keanu, you probably don't even remember my name, but I'll never forget yours or the lesson you left behind. I judged you. I looked at your clothes, your silence, your old wallet, and thought I knew your worth. But what I saw was only the surface. What you gave me wasn't just a tip. You gave me back a part of myself. A part that believed in people. That believed in quiet goodness. That night changed me. You didn't shame me. You didn't correct me. You just showed me what grace looks like when no one's watching. And maybe the world will never know how many lives you've quietly touched. But I promise, I'll carry your kindness forward, one coffee at a time." Rachel, she folded the letter carefully and slid it into an envelope. On the front, she wrote, "For the man with the $100 heart." She didn't have a P.O. box, didn't know where to send it, but she left it taped under the counter, just in case. Maybe he'll come back one day, she told herself. Maybe not. That night, the diner was quiet again. Just the hum of the neon, the distant buzz of traffic, and the soft clink of dishes being stacked. As Rachel turned off the lights and headed for the door, she noticed something unusual. A small package, wrapped in brown paper, sat on the doormat outside. She bent down and picked it up. There was no label, no name, no postage stamp, just a single handwritten note on top. For Rachel, K. Her heart skipped. She opened it carefully. Inside was a brand new coffee carafe. Sleek, polished stainless steel, with an engraved quote on the side. "Every act of kindness is a tiny revolution." Below it was a folded note. "P.S. Tell Marcos I didn't forget about him either. Check under the counter." K. She rushed back inside, pulled up the front panel of the counter, and gasped. There, taped to the wood, was an envelope marked, "For Marcos." Inside, another $100 bill. Rachel stood there, completely still. A smile crept across her face. Not the kind you fake. The kind that happens when the world feels right, even if just for a moment. She placed the new carafe on the counter the next morning with pride. Customers would ask about it, and every time she'd smile and say it was a gift from a customer, one who showed up at closing time and left more than a tip. Final narration, voice-over style. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who carry the greatest light, and sometimes a simple cup of coffee can become the beginning of a new life. All it takes is one act of quiet kindness from someone who never needed to prove who they were. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out into the night.